All right, what's up, everybody? Thanks for clicking this video. Thanks for tuning into my channel. My name is Simon Hill, Black American from Louisiana, coming to you live from Budapest, Hungary. Today is June 3rd, 2025, 7:11 p.m. where I'm at right now. Make a wish. And today we are on part 3, episode 3 of our 12th book in our Book to React series, Black Fatigue by Mary Frances Winters, How Racism Erodes the Mind, Body, and Spirit. This is an excellent book that you can pick up on Amazon for the humble price of only $17 paperback, $9.99 Kindle, and no hardcover, as there should be. Who needs hardcover anymore? Anyway, in our last reading of this book, Mary Winters was talking about her growing up, her life coming up in the U.S. as the descendant of Afro-Canadians, and the racism that she experienced, seeing her father get pulled over by police and harassed, getting called the N-word while in school, working in the corporate world at Kodak, and not being believed when she does presentations and reports. And, despite all of the challenges in her way, she was able to succeed, thrive, and continue to grow and develop, because that's what Black folks do. But unfortunately, she was fatigued along the way. She was dismayed to see that after all the effort she put in to make the corporate world more diverse, young Black professionals in the 2020s are still coming forward and saying that they're the only Black face in the room, that they're the only Black person in a boardroom, that they're the only Black person sitting in a seat of power and not being believed, still facing subtle forms of microaggressions or overt bigotry, and that issue still seems to cause fatigue on her mind. She also spoke about her ex-husband, how he unfortunately passed away from a heart condition at 47 years old, and how she feels like in the back of her mind that maybe his early death, was caused by racism in the medical field. Maybe he wasn't diagnosed early. Maybe he was improperly diagnosed before. Maybe he didn't get the right treatment because of his race, which is a real thing. Medical racism is very real. And so that's one of the other issues about Black fatigue and dealing with anti-Black racism, is that it's the not knowing. It's the not knowing that bothers you the most. You don't know if exactly why somebody was rude or disrespectful or overly nice or very callous towards you because of your Blackness. You don't know, and that's what causes even more fatigue. So it's a very fascinating book, very easy to read. I like her writing style, and we're going to be continuing today with chapter 2 in the text, addressing Sublime Ignorance. I don't know why this tag YouTube Studio Dashboard is still popped up. Maybe that's from OBS. I have no idea. Let me try to see if I can get that out of the way. I don't know. Okay, maybe I got it. All right, I got it out the way. So let's try to put that back out. All right, and it should still all be good. So let me know how the stream looks. Let me know how the sound is. If you're watching this on playback, I always suggest watching this on 2x to get the information faster. And I will be reacting to the text as we go. Addressing Sublime Ignorance. I just didn't know, opined corporate leaders during the wake of the 2020 Black Lives Matter rebellions against racism. They claimed they did not know that racism affected Black people so deeply. Now that we know, many vowed, we are committed to addressing systemic racism. This was not the first time I had heard the embarrassed admission from top brass that they were not aware of the day-to-day racism that the Black employees face. Randall Stevenson, AT&T's CEO, addressed the employee resources groups in 2016 after incidents of police shootings in several cities, including the widely publicized killing of Michael Brown, an unarmed Black teen in Ferguson, Missouri in 2014. In a video that went viral, Stevenson, a white man, vulnerably and sincerely admitted his ignorance about racism to the group. He recounted a story of his Black friend of 30 years, a medical doctor, who had shared a video with Stevenson of a talk he had given at his church. In the talk, the doctor outlined incidents of being stopped by police, being called boy, being mistaken for a server in restaurants, and never forgetting to carry ID when jogging in his neighborhood. Stevenson said that he was shocked by his friend's story and embarrassed that after such a long and close relationship, he had no idea how racism shaped the doctor's daily lived experiences. The doctor's story is all too familiar to many Black people. That's the thing, man. Us as Black folks, right? You know, we have our white friends, but usually instead of giving the right answer, we usually give the white answer. I talked about this when I talk about my travels. When people ask, how was X country? in my mind, I do the calculation. Do I give the right answer or do I give the white answer? Because the right answer is your true lived black experience. The white answer is the one that is the path to the least resistance, the one that will cause the least amount of questions or embarrassment. And also, frankly, you don't want to deal with the possibility of saying something that could ignite the ignorance of the other person. For example, you talk about your day at work and you say that this person was racist to you at the job, and you know it was racism at the job, but then the white person says, oh no, that couldn't have been racism. It could have been something else. And that is enough to upset a lot of people, right? Especially a lot of black folks. So yeah, let's continue here. So this is what I call sublime, defined as elevated and exalted ignorance. When many black people hear stories like this, we do not know whether to scream, cry, or laugh. How could you not know that racism is alive and well in America and throughout the world? The truth is that white people are not required to know. As the dominant group, they can go through life with the privilege of never thinking about their race. Many white people still claim not to see race. If you do not see it, there is no reason to address it. You can be sublimely ignorant. Many admit that they do not know the history of racism in this country. Most K-12 history books gloss over, sanitize, or inaccurately portray the realities of racism. And if you do not see race, why would you take the initiative to study it? If you want to be anti-racist, you need to have the knowledge. I refer you to some excellent resources such as Ibram X. Kendi's Stamped from the Beginning, which was written to tell the true story of the history of racist systems in America. The 1619 Project is an ongoing project of the New York Times created by Nicole Hannah-Jones to re-examine the legacy of slavery. Carol Anderson's White Rage chronicles the history of the entrenched forces that keep racism alive because of white anger and resentment. Black Reconstruction in America by W.E.B. Du Bois. The Slave Ship, A Human History by Marcus Rediker. That sounds good. I might check that out. A People's History of the United States by Howard Zinn. That's on the reading list. We will read that this summer, period. That needs to be read. The History of White People by Nell Irvin Painter. All recount history from the perspective of those who have been oppressed, challenging some of the accounts in traditional textbooks. Those are definitely on the reading list, automatic. Every client the Winters Group has ever had boast that it is data-driven and its leaders respond to statistics and facts. There is no shortage of data to prove that anti-black racism is, in many cases, just as prevalent today as it was 400 years ago. I expound on current inequities in Chapter 3. Why is it that it took global anti-racism, Black Lives Matter rebellions to wake the world up to these injustices? Those of us who are in the business of diversity, equity, inclusion, and justice have been trying to get the attention of corporate leaders for decades, only to be met with resistance or denial that racism against black people was still a key concern. Let's not make this about race. There are many other diversity dimensions that we need also to consider. If I had $1 for each time I heard that, I would be a wealthy woman. This is why I refer to George Floyd as a martyr, Mike Brown as a martyr, Trayvon as a martyr, etc., etc. The same way the Palestinians refer to every single grandmother who was killed under a bomb, whether she liked Hamas or not, as a martyr, is because when these people die, when our blood is shed, there is some type of karmic action that gets put into play. George Floyd did not die in vain because his death, unfortunately, even if his life was not dedicated towards it, his death has helped push along some type of reconciliation towards fighting back against white supremacy, right? I hope I'm framing my thoughts right, but I'm just trying to make this absolutely clear. There will be writing about George Floyd in the history books when they tell the story of how we eventually defeated white supremacy and how we actually now have a world where everybody is treated equally and fairly. They will be writing about Trayvon Martin. They will be writing about Breonna Taylor, et cetera, because these names are symbols now, even if they became hashtags, right? They became symbols, they became the rallying cry, they became the point of the movement to coalesce around, to fight for black life, black thought, and expression to be respected. So yeah, George Floyd is a martyr, and it's so crazy that these people, you know, who claim to be so smart and driven on statistics don't read the statistics that say black people keep on getting the short end of the stick in all matters of human activity in the United States, or also in other parts of the world. But continuing here. I am surprised, perhaps I should not be, by the questions I get from participants in various sessions on diversity and race. The questions often show ignorance of common concepts. The activists of this new movement are making it clear that it is not our job to educate the sublimely ignorant. One way to lessen the emotional toll and fatigue on black people is for the sublimely innocent to do their own work. Having said that, this book is part of the education. If you are reading it, you are doing the work of educating yourself. In this chapter, I offer definitions and clarifications of some key concepts that may be new, especially to people in the corporate world. In the corporate arena, concepts like diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging are more popular than the terms that I define in this chapter, such as racism, white supremacy, and decolonization. Diversity refers to the representation of different demographic groups in the organization. Inclusion and belonging are closely related and refer to the action of creating work environments that respect and value the differences. Equity is defined shortly. So she's doing the work of educating. This is the thing for me. I don't know if I could be, a white whisperer. I don't know if I could be that guy to go into the lion's den and educate white folks and have to hear stupid shit like, for example, well, black people enslaved white people too, which is something that you will hear white people say, like crazy stuff. Like, well, Jim Crow wasn't all that bad, or it was very short, or, my people came in 1930 and we never owned slaves, so we're blameless here. How are you going to blame a whole generation of people that never owned slaves for anything? All the stupid shit that white people say to absolve themselves of the stain of being the descendants of people and the rewardees, the recipients of so many unjustly earned rewards. It's hard for me to sit down at the other end of the table with that. It's hard for me to do that. I don't even do that. You get what I'm saying in my personal life when I talk to white folks. So I couldn't imagine doing that professionally. You would have to pay me a lot of money to do that. Anyway, the Winters Group studies the intersection of corporate diversity and inclusion work and social justice equity approaches. To understand and address black fatigue, it is necessary to grasp these concepts aimed at dismantling systemic racism. Corporate diversity efforts have failed to solve the systemic practices and policies that perpetuate inequitable outcomes, such as a lack of visibly diverse representation in senior leadership positions. I posit that the reason for this is that the rationale for corporate diversity focuses more on the business case than on social justice. The business case sounds like this: diversity drives innovation. Having more women in the C-suite drives profits. Diversity provides more opportunities to sell products to multicultural consumers. In corporate spheres, we have mastered capitalistic language for it is the right thing to do for business, but shy away from ideas that get to the structural historical isms that would support it is the just thing to do. Using the business case as the primary rationale for diversity can be exploitative. Hiring black people will yield more profit. It's, that's very complex. I mean, what she's trying to say here is that a lot of the business people say, we're going to hire blacks, Latinos, Asians, women, LGBTQ people and stuff like that, because diversity statistically has proven to make companies more profitable, rather than these companies saying, we're going to hire a diverse workforce because it's the right thing to do. Now, because we live under a system of capitalism, everything in our minds is distorted. So because our minds are distorted, we think, well, of course, a business should think about profits first. Any organization of people who are working together to make money for themselves and their families should be as selfish as possible, because that's how most people think under the system of capitalism. Rather invertedly thinking, any organization of people should be joined together to do the right thing first. Secondly, possibly earn a profit or earn the wages needed to maintain themselves. This is why, it might be hard for people not from America to understand this, but Americans are the only people on the planet who will say stuff like, our government should be run like a business. Businesses are the ideal way of running any type of organization. This is how Americans think because we are, the most capitalistic people on the planet. We've been indoctrinated under capitalism the most, so that's how we think. And so, it will be very hard to change this sort of like mind state that people have, that companies, and this is coming from the left. This is a critique of, the liberal sort of view that diversity is a good thing because it's more profitable for businesses, or it's an argument that they make for businesses. But instead of even making that argument, We should instead just say companies, all organizations should be trying to do the right thing for the people that are in those organizations and for the people that will be affected by those organizations, and also contribute to a more harmonious society, rather than thinking profits come first, shareholders come first, bottom line comes first. But that's impossible under a system of capitalism that distorts our minds so much. Continuing here. Understanding social justice concepts will provide new ways of addressing diversity, equity, and inclusion, DEI efforts, with a racial justice lens. I call this intersection diversity, equity, inclusion, and justice. DEJ loaf. Let's call it DEJ loaf. I don't know what the loaf stands for, but we know what the DEJ part does. So, black fatigue. I should first define what I mean by black fatigue. The dictionary defines fatigue as extreme tiredness resulting from mental or physical exertion or illness. A secondary definition refers to mental fatigue. Mental fatigue, not metal fatigue. All right, hold on. A secondary definition refers to metal fatigue, weakness in materials, especially metal, caused by repeated variations of stress. While the second definition is not related to human fatigue, I think it is a pro, especially the cause, repeated variation of stress. Therefore, I define black fatigue as repeated variations of stress that result in extreme exhaustion and cause mental, physical, and spiritual maladies that are passed down from generation to generation. Let's repeat. I define black fatigue as repeated variations of stress that result in extreme exhaustion and cause mental, physical, and spiritual maladies that are passed down from generation to generation. Generally, I would agree with that definition. I don't find any fault in it right now. Yeah, it's fine with me. It's fine with me. So it is a deeply embedded fatigue that takes inordinate amounts of energy to overcome, Herculean efforts to sustain an optimistic outlook, and enormous amounts of faith to continue to believe we shall overcome someday. Repeatedly, I hear a resounding chorus from black people I work with as I go from company to company consulting on DEJ. We are exhausted. Boy, yes, it can be tiring talking to the whites. It's real tiring. All right, so going to race. For those who deny race, let me share its meaning and manifestation. Race is a social construct developed by dominant groups to categorize people by physical characteristics, mainly skin color. While there is no biological basis for these distinctions, those who identify or were identified by whites as black have been considered inferior to those labeled as white. Still today, inequitable systems carry out this belief through racist practices. As I said earlier, complicating the definition of race is the fact that many white people have been socialized not to see race, especially their own. That's a lie. Let's keep it real. White folks might say, I don't see color. I don't see color. I was taught to treat people by the content of their character. That's a lie. We got to stop letting white people just lie to our faces. They'll straight up lie to our faces. So we need to stop believing this and repeating this bullshit lie. They don't see color. We replied, are you colorblind? Have you not lived in society? Are you not aware of the phenomenon known as whiteness and blackness or any other type of racial socialization? It's ridiculous. That's like saying, I don't see gender. Come on now. Like, we're having a whole culture war over whether a trans woman is actually a woman. And those same white folks who say, a woman is a woman, brother. Those are the same ones who will say, and I don't see color, brother. Shut up. Anyway, as I said earlier, complicating the definition of race is the fact that many white people have been socialized to not see race, especially their own, which leads to ignorance and denial of racial differences. As mentioned in Chapter 1, only 15% of whites think their race is important to their identity. That's still a lot. I don't know why you said only 15%. In my opinion, that's a lot. Until more white people acknowledge that race matters, that white as a racial classification really matters, we will continue to be stalled in our progress. White people must acknowledge their whiteness. If there were no white, there would be no black, and vice versa. We need to get comfortable talking about race and racism and stop using our discomfort as an excuse not to. It only serves to perpetuate and accept sublime ignorance. Read We Can't Talk About That at Work and Inclusive Conversations for Strategies for Talking About Race. Okay, she's talking to an audience of people who are in the, DEI, corporate inclusion work and stuff like that. I'm not saying, this is turning me off. I'm just saying this isn't really meant for me. right? But I'm glad that she finally explained black fatigue. We're getting more insight into how she labels things in her philosophy, and hopefully getting to the point where she says what we can do to stop this, stop black fatigue, and create a better world. So, equity versus equality. Equity can be defined as the treatment of people according to what they need and deserve. This is contrasted with the more familiar term equality, which connotes that we treat everybody the same. There is a popular image showing three children trying to view a baseball game over a fence. In the first picture, in figure 2-1, each child is standing on the same size box. However, the tallest child does not need a box, and the smallest child still cannot see the box, is not high enough to accommodate her needs. In the first picture, each child is treated equally but not equitably. In the second picture, equity, the three boxes have been reallocated so that the smallest child is given 2 boxes, the next smallest child is given 1 because that is what he needs, and the tallest child is not provided with a box because he can never see over the fence without it. The third image, liberation, shows the barrier fence completely removed. Removing barriers is the ultimate goal. Absolutely. So here's equality, here's equity, and here's liberation. Facts. Okay, I like this. I like this. Now, there's some people, because on our channel, we're always going to play both sides of the fence and be devil's advocate, right? There are some people that would say, because race is a social construct, it should not be any sort of barrier. Technically, because we're all human beings, and I'm using the right way of framing this, they would say we're all human beings, we all have equal opportunities in life, or some of us, despite our race and what you might presume to be my white privilege or male privilege or any type of advantage I might have in society, we all face different traumas and setbacks and hurdles in life. There's a white guy who had said, hey, I might be a white cis man, but I grew up poor, my daddy died, my mama was on drugs, I went to jail a few times, and I did something for myself, right? And yeah, so that's the point they're trying to make. The point they're trying to make is that, you know, people will go through ish in life, and also on top of that, there will be people, despite, you know, their race, that will have successes and advantages and leverage that other people won't have, right? But what those people are missing in their argument is the history of this thing. Of course, race is a social construct, and a black person is no less intelligent than a white person. So saying that, you know, because this guy is taller than this little girl, that's like an inherent thing, right? Because your height is something like you cannot genetically control. Some people will definitely be taller. But just because you're black doesn't mean that you are less intelligent, less inherently capable as a white person or any other type of person. So somebody might say those are false equivalencies right here. But we would argue that this picture, while painting an analogy, is trying to talk about the history. It's trying to talk about the history more. Black people are at a disadvantage in our society because of the history of racism, Jim Crow, redlining, the war on drugs, police brutality, et cetera, and constant discrimination in the workplace today, right? And the inherent biases that we're taught in society about black people, right? Think about these kids as if they were all born at the same time, but they all went through something traumatic. This kid who's hella tall had good parents that took care of him. They fed him very well. That's why he got tall. The little girl, you know, had parents that, you know, didn't feed her very much and were abusive towards her. Therefore, her growth was stunted. And the girl in the wheelchair, she was hit by a car or something like that, and that caused her to be handicapped and paralyzed now. The history of these people matter, not something inherent to them. Their inherent height, something that they can't control. You get what I'm saying? Hopefully that was all clear. I just wanted to make that clear because I think it's important not to just take everything on face value with these books and actually challenge the books from the voices of the right, from the voices of the racists, of the fascists, from the voices of the people who would read this and still say this is garbage, this is trash, black people are still monkeys, black people are still savages, black people are still, you know, demons, and all sorts of negative stuff that we still hear people say, right? So yeah, that's the point of me talking about that, but I'm going to continue here. All right, one client spent almost a year trying to convince the organization that it should add equity to its diversity and inclusion strategy. Other clients have admitted that they are still trying to define diversity and inclusion and are clearly not ready to introduce the concept of equity. If organizations cannot include equity as one of their goals, what then is the goal? Why not liberation? See, liberation is destruction of the entire company altogether. They don't want to talk about that. Continuing, so racist versus racism, or racist/racism. Many people still believe that racism is something that only happens interpersonally, not recognizing that while it does happen at the individual level, it is more insidious as a set of systems and structures that favor the dominant group, mostly whites, and negatively affect subordinated groups. Racism involves one group having the power to carry out systematic discrimination through institutional policies and practices. Similarly, we are uncomfortable with the term racist. Calling someone racist has become akin to alleging that they are a despicable person, and there is a difference between being non-racist and being anti-racist. And non-racist is a person who has an inactive, passive belief that racism is wrong. It is one who rejects racism. Anti-racists take a stand in their sphere of influence to oppose racism. For example, a non-racist might not tell a racist joke, but would not intervene when someone else did. Perhaps the non-racist would even laugh along with others. An anti-racist would not laugh at the joke and would go one step further to let the person know that the joke was inappropriate and offensive. And I think that's a very good analogy, a very good way to describe non-racist and anti-racist. A non-racist to me might as well be a racist. Because a non-racist will passively let real forms of bigotry and discrimination go on that have negative effects. There's a lot of non-racists who are passively supporting Zionism, allowing the Gazans to be genocided, right? There's a lot of non-racists who voted for Donald Trump, and he is now attacking, the Haitians in America by rescinding their protected status, sending them back to a country that's overrun by gangs and guns. There's a bunch of non-racists who are okay generally with the Republicans' attacks on voting rights that disproportionately affect, people of color in America. There's a lot of non-racists who are just okay with racism happening. So in my book, you might as well be a racist. If you were a German citizen living in Nazi Germany while the Nazis were, committing heinous atrocities, you might as well be a Nazi in my book. The only people that mattered are those who oppose Nazism, who oppose racism, who oppose Zionism, and any other forms of oppression of different groups of people. Continuing here. Some theorists believe that at the core we are all racist. No, I hate that. No, we are not all racist. Some of us are explicitly anti-racist. We are not all racist. I hate when people say that. Well, everybody's a little bit racist. No. We are not all a little bit racist. So some of us might do a racism. Some of us might say a distasteful joke or make distasteful words or slurs. But when push comes to shove, who is going to actually fight back against the racists, the white supremacists, the Nazis, the fascists? Anti-racist. Not everybody is racist. I hate when people say that. Whenever you start to bring up anti-blackness or racism, there's some idiot out there who has to say, well, we're all a little bit racist. No, that's not true. Be a white person walking through Kenya and watch how the Africans literally get on their feet and worship you like a god. Watch how the Africans worship the Mzungu like God. Watch the Kenyans fight you tooth and nail if you tell them Jesus wasn't white. Watch them. No, not everybody is racist. The white man is literally worshiped like a god on earth. How are we saying that everybody's a little bit racist, brother? No. All of y'all are racist. The majority of the whites are racist because that's how white identity was built around. You have to have some other to make sure that you have some system to uphold yourself and identify yourselves, and that depends on the subjugation of the black body. But no, not all of us are racist like y'all. Not all of us have the capacity to inflict racism upon other groups of people. Racism is a systematic practice. It's when you have the guns, the money, the control of the media, and you're able to dictate the lives of other people. How can an African country tell Great Britain what to do? How could the Congo tell Belgium to suck its dick? But most of the nuclear weapons in the world are in the hands of the Caucasoids. Most of the financial power in the world is controlled by the Caucasoids. The religions of the world are controlled by the Caucasoids or the Caucasoid adjacent. Come on now. The media of the world is controlled by the Caucasoids and the Caucasoid adjacent. Stop playing. Not all of us are racist. I hate when people say that. It really annoys me. Anyway, some theorists believe that at the core we are all racist because we are part of a society whose very foundation was built on racist ideals and practices that persist today. Brain science reveals that we internalize racist messages from a racist society that become part of who we are, whether we are aware of it or not. Unless we are willing to acknowledge these realities and begin to use the term, we cannot address the racist systems that undergird our organizational practices. I know that corporations do not like to use this term because of the legal risks of admitting to racism. Notwithstanding that very valid concern, we must be willing to learn more about the history of racist systems that may still unwittingly drive processes and practices. We have to say the word to address the problem. All right. Nelson Moreno says, I think we are all racist. It's been shown in replicated studies. In the case of black people, it's self-hate toward whites. It's self-hate, not toward whites. It doesn't excuse white supremacy at all. That's a very good point, Nelson. That's a very good point. There are black people that demonstrate self-hate towards ourselves. Like in the doll test. The little black girls wanted to play with the white doll more than the black doll, right? And other groups of people around the world say things and exhibit things and act in ways that show that they have self-hate towards themselves because of their distance from whiteness or Europeanness, however you want to define it. I get that. But I don't think that is explicitly what they mean by saying we're all a little racist. The people that say, well, we're all a little racist are saying to some degree that there's an equivalent amount of hate that comes from a non-white group towards white people. And that is not the case at all. That is not the case at all. Okay? Racism, Nelson Moreno says, racism gets very entrenched inside the unconscious. I agree, but I differentiate self-hate from racism. You know, Nelson, right now, if a white man were to come in here and say, Simon Hill, keeping it trill, nah, brother, you need to know everybody's a little racist. And it sounds like to me, Simon Hill, keeping it trill, you hate white people. That if somebody said that, they're trying to say that I represent like the black form of Nazism, or the black form of the KKK, or the black form of MAGA, or the black form of the colonization societies and all the other wicked institutions that the whites have created. When we know there is no equivalent. There is no equivalent of any type of group like the Nazis, the KKK, any other hatred group, any other group built on hatred from non-white people towards white people. That does not exist. They might point to the Black Panthers. That did not exist. The Black Panthers were not an explicitly anti-white racist organization. There's never been a movement. There's never been a movement within our community of black folks saying we just hate white people and we want to kill them all and lynch them all and rape their mothers and stuff like that. That does not exist. You know what I'm saying? Nelson Moreno says, by we are all racist, it means we are all anti-black, even blacks. The white supremacists mean that we, races, all hate each other. That's an interesting point. I agree with that. I agree with you. I think we agree, but I think we have a fundamental disagreement about how we define self-hate. I don't define self-hate as a type of racism. I don't define self-hate as a type of racism. For example, let's say I was applying for a job at a company. And I go in for the interview and, hey, look, it's a brother. It's a brother interviewing me. He owns the company. Black man, my tone, nappy hair. You get what I'm saying? He looks just like me. Could be my cousin. And he doesn't hire me because I find out later he doesn't want another black man in the office. He's trying to hire Brad or Connor. He's trying to hire one of them. I wouldn't turn around and say that brother is racist. I would say he's an uncle. He's a RACOON. He's a Candace Owens, you know what I'm saying? He's a Clarence Thomas. But I wouldn't call him racist. You get what I'm saying? That's what I think is the differentiation. So Nelson, if you were discriminated against by another black man who didn't hire you because you were another black man, would you really call him racist? Or would you call him some version of COON? Or a uncle? An uncle whose name rhymes with mom. You get what I'm saying? I think there's the differentiation. That's my opinion. You get what I'm saying? But this is a very interesting topic. It's a very interesting topic. I would like to know what you think, Nelson. But continuing here. Most of the day-to-day accounts of racism convey individual-level racism and often fail to acknowledge the systems that undergird the issues. For example, we see media coverage of individual blacks being exonerated after being incarcerated for crimes that they did not commit, and think these are isolated instances. However, there is a much bigger system of mass incarceration that disproportionately affects black people, which Michelle Alexander portrays in her book, The New Jim Crow. John McWhorter, oh my God, professor at Columbia University and contributor to The Atlantic, penned a piece in July 2019 that posits that the definition of racist has morphed over the years. He says the term racist has become synonymous with evil. It is. He's not wrong. With almost the same emotional trigger as calling someone a pedophile. No, it's even worse than being a pedophile. Because you could even argue being a pedophile is some type of sexual predilection that mostly affects white men. You could argue that. You could argue that pedophilia is some type of sexual attraction that we as a society are not treating properly, right? Racism is just pure flat out evil, wicked. The worst thing you could be is an anti-black racist. If you were an anti-black racist, you are the only type of person I think should be castrated. You're the only type of person I think should be burnt at the stake. You're the only type of person I believe should be lynched. You're the only type of person who deserves 2 to the dome if you're an anti-black racist. And I'm not encouraging violence to anybody. I'm just saying what I think you deserve if you're an anti-black racist. I would offer more grace to the pedo than I would to the anti-black racist. Period. 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 Facts. Okay? He believes that the power of the word carries as much weight in its moral sanction as the definition itself. Meaning that if a critical mass does not think what was said was racist, then it cannot be so. Let's read that again. He believes that the power of the word carries as much weight in its moral sanction as the definition itself, meaning that if a critical mass does not think what was said was racist, then it cannot be so. That's ridiculous. That means eventually we could get to a point, hypothetically, we could get to a point where white people are back, like the 60s come back. White people explicitly just call black people the N-word straight to their face. Hey, nyah! Yay, shut up, nyah, in a movie theater in, let's say, 2035. And if society has somehow morphed to the point where anti-black racism is accepted, then calling a black person a dirty, filthy nyah in a movie theater is now not racist. That's ridiculous. That's ridiculous. If we're at this point now where just what society's mass definition of something is makes it not racist, number one, how do we even gauge that? How do you even gauge that? Yes, there can be a variety of opinions, but there can be some actions that are so explicitly heinous that we're not going to, And this is the thing. John McWhorter is a right-wing conservative black grifter, and I'm sure he would not have the same sort of frame of logic or line of reasoning for anti-Semitism or Zionism. I'm sure he would still fall under the same type of narrow definition to say that, yeah, something is anti-Semitic if it's criticizing Israel's right to defend itself. I'm pretty sure John McWhorter falls in that camp because he gets paid by those rich white right-wing billionaires who basically fund all those right-wing think tanks and pay these guys 6 figures a year to continue to churn out BS that confuses the people. I'm going to go to the comments. Nelson Moreno says, I would call him racist because he believes, maybe unconsciously, that his own race is inferior. Own race or other. Racism means belief in race hierarchy. I hear where you're coming from, Nelson. I think that's where we would just disagree. And maybe we can respectfully disagree. Because it's hard for me to even think of calling another black man a racist. That doesn't even compute in my mind. I could not even fathom how I would get to the point of calling a black man a racist. I would say he is practicing white supremacy. He has been forced to now accept, a white supremacist framing and has hate towards his own blackness and his own black identity. Right? I could not just call I could never get to the point of calling a black man a racist, even if he's doing a racism, especially to his own people, right? Or the people that he is ascribed to belong to. That's the thing. That's the thing. So yeah, until we're at the point where black men control society and we get to throw masses of white men in jail, where we get to sexually attack and defile masses of their women, until we get to the point we get to castrate them and ship them across the oceans, stuff like that. Until we get to the point we can do that, I cannot call a black man a racist. I can't do it, no matter what he does. No matter what he does. Period. I'm standing on that. I'm standing on that. There is nothing a black man could do to make me say he is a racist unless he's exerting some sort of systemic, powerful force along in collaboration with other black men for me to call him a racist. All right? Black people can practice self-hate, but we cannot practice racism. All right? So he believes that the power of the word carries as much weight in its moral sanction as the definition itself, meaning that if a critical mass does not think that what was said was racist, then it cannot be so. That is the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard. One example he uses is President Donald Trump's admonition that the squad, women of color, House of Representative members Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, Ilhan Omar, Ayanna Pressley, and Rashida Tlaib, should all go back where they came from if they had criticism of the United States. All but one were born in the United States, and the other has lived in the United States for a long time. Trump's fellow Republicans loudly and proudly declared that the president was not a racist. Morally, that would clearly not be acceptable, and therefore his comments could not be deemed as racist. This is an example of how dominant groups' power works. Narratives that advantage them are accepted by the rest of the dominant group. Individuals can be considered racist if they believe, in general, that their group is superior to other groups, and they have a history of consistently and publicly saying and acting in ways that would confirm their convictions. There is also misunderstanding on the question of whether black people can be racist. The answer is yes and no. At the individual and interpersonal levels, we can harbor racist views of other groups. We have seen instances of black people being anti-Semitic. Intragroup racism is an aspect of internalized oppression where you hate people who look like you. Most critical race theorists assert that black people cannot be racist using the structural definition, as it necessitates having the power to implement policies that negatively affect subordinated groups, and black people do not collectively possess such power. Non-racist versus anti-racist. In the book How to Be Less Stupid About Race, Crystal Fleming, a sociology professor at Stony Brook University, says non-racists think racism plays out as extreme overt acts such as hate crimes. Non-racists might proudly declare, "I do not have a racist bone in my body," not understanding the entrenched structural nature of racism. Oh God, the platitudes. Oh. Historian Ibram X. Kendi, author of How to Be an Anti-Racist, said in a 2019 interview for The Guardian, proclaiming that you are not racist does not require anyone to consider how they should fight racism. It is not enough to not be racist. It's important to be opposed to racism and demonstrate such opposition in your words, deeds, and actions. Anti-racists do not sit on the sidelines and say, "Isn't that awful?" when they see racist actions. Anti-racists take a stand in their sphere of influence to oppose racism. Moving on to the next section, white and whiteness. Whiteness is normalized in culture, creating an unawareness of the set of privileges associated with white identity, also known as white privilege. Whiteness theory posits that whiteness is the default of American culture, and as a result, white people cannot see the advantages of being white, so much so that many do not even want to discuss whiteness. In many sessions that I conduct, white people express extreme discomfort in talking about whiteness or any aspects of racial dynamics. As pointed out earlier, only 15% of white people say that their race is core to their identity. White people must engage in honest self-reflection regarding the messages, images, values, beliefs, and experiences they have encountered living in a culture that continues to prioritize their worldviews as the better ones. Whiteness studies needs to become an official discipline. Whiteness studies needs to become an official academic discipline. Whiteness studies needs to become an official academic discipline because I want to get a PhD in white studies. Going on to Nelson Moreno, but what would you say when a Pakistani man discriminates against a Bangladeshi man, racism is not exclusive to white supremacy and its history. Okay, Pakistan is a nationality. Bangladesh is a nationality. They are being xenophobic. This is the thing. This is why I stopped using the word racism, because we start calling everything racism. Like, I've spoken about this. The number one comments that annoy me on my channel are when Italians or Germans or whoever comes in and says, yeah, I'm living in the UK and they're racist against me because I'm Polish or whatever. That's ridiculous. There's other words in English. This is the thing. In English, we have other words to express different types of discrimination. We have jingoism. We have nationalism or nationalist bigotry. We have xenophobia. We have other words to express the idea of different types of discrimination. The same way racism does not equal sexism. These are two different concepts, two different types of discrimination. But the thing is, we've allowed the word racism to get so bastardized that it means nothing. People are saying, people are racist against me because of my freckles. Shut up. Shut up. Shut the fuck up. Shut up. So, yeah, like, racism is not exclusive to white supremacy and its history. Yes, I agree. But we're talking about anti-blackness here. And anti-blackness as a phenomenon within the, average occurrence of racism has morphed what the concept of racism even is. Let's say before the invention of blackness and the invention of whiteness and all that type of stuff, racism was very common. Let's say hypothetically that, the Japanese, the people who were nationalized as Japanese had issues with people that spoke Korean. Let's say it was based on language. The people who spoke Japanese disrespected people that were called Korean, right? But when the creation of blackness came and the phenomenon spread across the world, the knowledge of a group of people who are so beneath humanity that they are just referred to the absence of all light, black. Now the whole dynamic changes. The Korean-speaking man and the Japanese man might discriminate against each other based on language and their perceived cultural differences, but they at least know that there is another aspect of humanity that is below even them, to either of their schemas of the other person, and that is blackness. And that's what I think is the inherent difference, right? We have different words to describe discrimination. Let's stop calling everything racism. Nelson Moreno says, no, it's racism. Ask a Bangladeshi why they seceded from Pakistan. Once again, if y'all want to call that racism, fine. I've abandoned the word racism. I don't use it anymore. I explicitly talk only about anti-blackness because I'm telling you, in the English world, there are other words. The English language has more words in it than many other languages. I know people like to shit on English a lot, and they say, oh, there's a word in my language that is so untranslatable in English, and English is such a pedestrian language. And a lot of ESL speakers do that as a type of cope. They do that as a type of cope for the fact that they have to learn English to some degree to move up in this world, and secondly, by the fact that the whites bullied them into forcing them into learning the language, so they have to cope somehow. And thirdly, they like to shit on it because, they barely study. They only learn enough to not understand how deep the English language actually is. And I'm not caping for English. Even though I'm an English teacher, the Wi-Fi I'm talking on is bought by me being able to speak the Queen's English. The lights I'm talking to you on are paid for by me being able to speak the Queen's English. This channel got 5,000 subscribers, small as that may be, by me being able to speak the Queen's English. But I'm not caping for English here. But what I'm saying is that in English, we have other words to express different types of discrimination. And Pakistan is a nation. Bangladesh is a nation. People hating each other based on their national identities is called nationalism. It's called jingoism. It's called xenophobia. If you even want to go deeper, xenophobia is a type of discrimination based on ethnicity. So two people can be of the same race but of different ethnicities and hate each other because of that. All right? So Nelson Moreno says, by the way, shout out to Kamal, pound to Kamal right here. But Nelson Moreno says, we love our little dark Bangladeshi brothers. Stuff that the Pakistani were saying. That's racism. Okay. I don't know how that's racism if he says he loves the brothers. And they're both dark. Let's keep it real. Bangladeshis and Pakistanis are dark. I've seen some Pakistanis and Bangladeshis who are darker than me. I'd be like, damn, that nigga Wesley Snipes. Yeah, Wesley Snipes with the big beard smelling like curry. Crazy. That's crazy. But that's not the same thing. That's not the same thing. Let's stop falling in, to these same traps. If somebody discriminates against you or they express bigotry or hatred based on somebody's nationality, let's stop bastardizing the English language. Okay, y'all are making me sound like a right-wing conservative. Y'all are making me sound like a right-wing conservative defending the English language, when that is not the case at all. Okay, national identities, Bangladesh didn't exist. Yes, it didn't exist. There was a time blackness didn't exist, but now it does. And people are able to make judgment calls based on that. I don't get what's so hard to understand about that. Acti, are you hearing this madness? Are you hearing the madness from these people that are making me pop a blood vein? Nelson's going to make me have a heart attack. You hear what they're saying. You look in the comments for yourself. Anyway, I'm just going to leave it with this. I don't even care. Nelson Moreno, anybody else who wants to twist and morph English to the point where racism means people are discriminating against me because I'm wearing sunglasses. If y'all want to twist racism to the point that it means people are hating on me because I'm wearing sunglasses, which is where the point is going to, fine, y'all can have it. I don't give a fuck. I don't care. All right. Nelson Moreno says Bangladesh was born because they face extreme discrimination. I said extreme discrimination. That might be true. Discrimination because they were a shade darker. Okay, I think that's a bit simplistic. Nelson, that's a bit simplistic. Come on. That's a bit simplistic. That's a bit simplistic. Come on now. I'm not even going to dignify that. Not because I couldn't go to war with that, but I don't even want to dignify that. Oh shit, y'all are making me so hot that I'm sliding all over the page. Slipping and sliding all over the page. Continuing here. White privilege. White privilege is defined as rights that only some people have access to as members of a dominant social group. Intergroup hierarchies of privilege exist, with people who are part of the group in power at the top. White or Caucasian people with respect to people of color, men with respect to women, heterosexuals with respect to homosexuals, adults with respect to children, and rich people with respect to poor people. White people often deny that their race affords them privilege. I have heard white people say, I grew up poor and certainly was not privileged. On the dimension of wealth, perhaps not. However, racial privilege still exists. The key point is that people who are visibly white in complexion enjoy unearned privilege that, for the most part, they are oblivious to, sublime ignorance, unless they are intentional about understanding it. This oblivion or denial that such privilege exists is fatiguing for black people. We cannot have meaningful discussions about addressing racism until there is understanding and acknowledgement of privilege. As an example, white parents do not have to have the talk that black parents have with their children about how to respond if they are stopped by police. I explain the talk more in Chapter 8. White supremacy. This is a term that is really misunderstood. Enlighten us, Mary. Enlighten us. When people hear white supremacy, they think the KKK, neo-Nazis, white nationalists, and avowed white groups, avowed hate groups. While these groups openly admit their hatred for blacks, Jewish people, immigrants, and so on, and are prone to perpetrating violence against them based on their beliefs. That whites are superior and all others should be eliminated, they by no means embody the definition of white supremacy. White supremacy is the ideology, whether conscious or unconscious, explicit or implied, that white people and the ideas, thoughts, beliefs, and actions of white people are superior to people of color and their ideas, thoughts, beliefs, and actions. It can also be defined as a political or socio-economic system in which white people enjoy structural advantage and rights that other racial and ethnic groups do not at a collective and an individual level. Facts. That's the way I would describe it. I repeat, the definition of white supremacy for people that don't know. It is defined as a political or socio-economic system in which white people enjoy structural advantage and rights that other racial and ethnic groups do not, at both a collective and an individual level. Study that for the exam. Highlight that. Put that in your notes. White supremacy means that white ideals are the norm, and by default, every other group's beliefs are abnormal. Just as the term supreme conveys whiteness is superior to all others. All right. Nelson Moreno is going down the Bangladesh rabbit hole. I'm not clicking that Wikipedia link. And he said, Nelson right here, he said, these willing executioners were fueled by an abiding anti-Bengali racism, especially against the Hindu minority, against East Pakistan, now Bangladesh. This is the point, Nelson, that I'm trying to point out to you. This is the point I'm trying to point out. I don't care how other people use this word racism. If they're going to say there was anti-Bengali racism, I believe other people are bastardizing this word. It's starting to lose all types of meaning and focus. So you could quote as many people as you want using the term racism to define hatred against another group of people. I'm not even concerned with that. While it is possible, I'll concede this. Let's say there were a bunch of soldiers hyped up to go to war against Bangladesh for the freedom of Pakistan, right? For whatever reason. Despite the fact that Bangladesh and Pakistan were separated by hundreds of kilometers, despite the fact that the British partitioned India, forced all the Muslims into two different regions and tried to call them the same country, even though they didn't even share a land border, despite the fact that the Bangladeshi speak Bangladeshi, a totally different language than Urdu, what they speak in Pakistan. Despite all of that, yes, people can be fueled by a type of what can be defined as racism against another group of people. But I would argue that those people were not, turned up off a racism against those people. It was based on national bigotry, xenophobia, patriotic pride, etc., etc. There's other ways of framing it. It's just racism is such an easier word to use that I believe it has lost all meaning. You get what I'm saying? Anyway, in the corporate world, white supremacy is most often demonstrated as heterosexual white male supremacy. For example, organizational cultures are built to favor capitalism, individualism, and the right to comfort and entitlement. As I mentioned earlier, the rationale for diversity often comes from a capitalistic mindset. We are only interested in diversity if it benefits what we prioritize: profits. Individualism assumes that success is based solely on hard work without considering systemic barriers. The right to comfort may be expressed as not wanting to talk about race because it makes white people feel uncomfortable. There is comfort in perpetuating the idea of a colorblind world. Go into the comments. Kamal says, shit, white supremacy is exemplified by the asshole in a phone conference interview an hour ago. I nearly hung up on. That's funny, man. All right. Kamal was struggling on the phone. There was some guy named Brad on the other end who just wouldn't shut up. He wouldn't shut up on the line. Getting on Kamal's last nerves. Anyway. One of my clients shared a story that exemplifies what white supremacist ideology looks like. He attended a community meeting to discuss racism. He said there were probably 60 people at the meeting, 40 were black people and 20 were white. He observed that the white people dominated the conversation, sharing their perceptions of how to address racism without giving equal voice to the black participants. He said it finally hit him that white people just think it is normal to be in control of everything and to be experts on racism, even while admitting they don't know much about it. Well, I'm white, so I must be right. That's what Kamal was going through. He went through a meeting talking about black issues, and Brad came to the microphone and said, listen, fellas, I think I know the answers. Dominant and subordinated groups. Dominant and subordinated groups are another way to understand white supremacy. Dominant groups are those with systemic power, privileges, and social status within a society, most often white people. Conversely, subordinated groups are those that have been traditionally oppressed, excluded, or disadvantaged in society, most often black and brown people, indigenous people, women, and members of the LGBTQ community. For the purposes of this book, I focus on black people. Dominant groups are considered the norm, and by default, subordinated groups are considered abnormal. Dominant groups make the rules, and all others are judged by their standards. Dominant and subordinated groups are not equivalent to the majority and the minority. Consider apartheid in South Africa. Blacks were the numerical majority. Even so, whites were the dominant group with the power. Note that I use the term subordinated rather than subordinate. The term subordinate means inferior. Subordinated is more accurate, as it denotes that the lesser status has been imposed. All right, you know it, comrade. Gerald, a prick with a power ego. Gerald, a prick with a power. That's funny, man. That's funny. Going here to Nelson Moreno, he says, now the Bangladeshi did have differences, but they only succeeded because they faced intense racism, because they were darker and smaller. Dog, believe me. Nelson, I feel like you just met a bad Bangladeshi broad today. Nelson, do you want to come and just be honest and admit you fell in love with Miss Singh? You fell in love with Miss Singh. She came to the counter today at the convenience store you work at. Her brown skin turned you on, but also that long, straight 1C hair. She had a white woman's hair, a black woman's skin tone, and an Asian woman's body, and you just were enthralled by the idea of smashing that into oblivion and breeding into this world little boys and girls with Hindu last names and and African lips. Is that what you were looking at, Nelson? Because you're going hard for the Bangladeshis today. You're going really hard for the Bangladeshis today. Like you're watching this channel right now, laid up in bed with a fine Southeast Asian. You laid up with a fine Lily Singh right now. You got Lily Singh in your bed right now. You smashing on Lily Singh, and you really don't want to feel bad about it. So you really talking about, man, now the Bangladeshis, they niggas too. That's how it's coming across, man. That's how it's coming across. I'm confused right now, man. Talk to me, man. I don't get it. Anyway, I'm going to continue reading here. Oppression. Subordination leads to oppression, defined as the systematic subjugation of one social group by a more powerful social group for the social, economic, and political benefit of the more powerful social group. Rita Hardiman and Bailey Jackson state that oppression exists when the following four conditions are present. The oppressor group has the power to define reality for themselves and others. The target group take it in and internalize the negative messages about them and end up cooperating with the oppressors, commonly known as internalized oppression. Then third, genocide, harassment, and discrimination are so systemic and institutionalized that individuals are not necessary to keep it going. And four, members of both the oppressor and target groups are socialized to play their roles as normal and correct. Sounds about right. Sounds about a good description of oppression. All right. Nelson Moreno says, nah, I'm a little familiar with the partition of India. I was also surprised. Those people are very racist because of English manipulation. Also because of the caste system, man. Let's keep it real. You know, I don't know why the Pakistanis, the Indians, the Bangladeshis, all of them, you know, are so turned up against black people. Because number one, we never did anything to them. Two, a lot of us generally look the same other than our hair texture and stuff like that. And three, you know, we're both descendants. Everybody living today are descendants of colonized or enslaved people so across the world by European powers. So I don't get why the Bangladeshis and Pakistanis are so turned up against black folks, right? But I think a lot of it has to do with the caste system and also just proximity to whiteness. There are some Southeast Asians that can pass for white, and you know how it goes. Whenever these, you know, groups of other people move to these Western countries, their goal is to assimilate. The goal is to assimilate and gain closer proximity to whiteness, and whiteness in and of itself is defined by how much they can subjugate and denigrate blackness. So that's what the Southeast Asians do, right? Continuing here. I have observed oppressive systems and organizations that purport to want to create inclusive environments. The diversity office is often woefully under-resourced to achieve the goals that are set forth. The oppressor group, in this case, top leadership, defines the reality. The diversity office does not need resources to do its job. The diversity office cooperates with the oppressor, which leads to black fatigue. This is the story of a very well-respected chief diversity officer, CDO, in a Fortune 500 organization. As a CDO, I am always pounding my head against the wall, unable to have real and sustainable impact on our organizations. I have served in this role in 3 organizations, and in each instance, the senior-most leaders have convinced me that they wanted to advance D&I, diversity and inclusion, in their organizations and lured me in. Yet after about 6 months in the job, the honeymoon has consistently been over. Those budget dollars you are promised never come. You don't have a seat at the table where critical business and people decisions are being made. Your recommendations for policy and practice changes are often ignored, and your work is always an afterthought. Once you bring to leadership's attention the issues you have uncovered and the work that needs to be done to move forward, they get defensive and consistently push back, demanding more and more data and empirical proof that the experiences of their underrepresented recruits and professionals are real. In the meantime, the underrepresented professionals in your organization are looking to you as their savior and are convinced you are going to save the day for them. Little do they know that you cannot. This conundrum has me very wary, and I have become more pessimistic than I ever thought I would be. My days in this work are quickly coming to an end as I realize that it is killing my very spirit. I refuse to continue banging my head against the wall. Black fatigue. Black fatigue. I have worked with, what was it called? CDO. CDO is Chief Diversity Officer. I have worked with this Chief Diversity Officer, and she has been forced to play her role as normal and correct. She has shared with me a number of times how fatiguing this role is, and even admitted to being on the edge at times. All right, don't go postal now. Cassandra, don't go postal. Just chill. All right. They had caste systems, but not so much under Islam, and the British organized them through skin color. This process lasted hundreds of years. Well, Nelson Moreno, since you're pulling up Wikipedia articles, all right, there is a Wikipedia article about the caste in Islam. Caste system among Southeast Asian Muslims. So Nelson Moreno, you saying, the caste system isn't important? Drop that, look in that wiki. Since you love wikis, Nelson, since you love wikis, have a look at that. Have a look at that. All right? So, Nelson Moreno also says they had caste systems when, okay, that's the same one. So, yeah, take a look at that, then holla back. All right? So, social justice. Social justice is a term that, until recently, we rarely heard in the corporate world, except in philanthropy conversations. Social justice means the way in which human rights are experienced in the everyday lives of people at every level of society and their fair distribution of wealth, opportunities, and privileges. Persistent gender wage inequities are a matter of social justice, as it was not a term that was widely used in corporate venues until the Black Lives Matter protest of 2020. I received many questions about what it means. As another example of white supremacy, several white participants in sessions challenged their organizations on moving in this direction, asserting that they objected to the idea of redistribution of resources. It was not fair to hardworking white people. Integrating a social justice lens with traditional DEI efforts will not be without controversy. I love the way she writes. It's just so simple. It's just so straight to the point. All right? So, going here, decolonization. To decolonize means to free a group from the oppressive powers of domination. I honor the Genesis term decolonize in its historical and literal meaning that signifies the repatriation and return of land to the indigenous communities from whom that land was originally stolen. Many of us continue to live on and benefit from colonization, and this needs to be acknowledged and understood. I do not want to misappropriate the term. However, I include it here because you will be hearing it used more by social justice advocates. In social justice parlance, decolonization is about undoing white supremacist structures that disadvantage Black people and other marginalized groups. The 2020 Black Lives Matter movement is an example of decolonization efforts, as well as attempts to defund police departments that intentionally engaged in violence against Black people. Colonization is also a state of mind when we contribute to and perpetuate colonial principles. Decolonization of the mind refers to active resistance of settler state norms and resurgence of pre-colonial indigenous practices, such as natural healing practices, and we, collectivists, instead of I, individualistic culture. In DEI work, decolonization might look like the following: centering justice, humanity, and the dismantling of racist systems over the business case and the profit in DEIJ strategies. Understanding and embracing rather than avoiding and sanitizing certain language and concepts that are critical to understanding equity and justice, such as those outlined in this chapter. Decentering white comfort over necessary change. Corporate DEI leaders spend inordinate amounts of time on efforts to make the white leaders comfortable. Promoting white allyship and shared risk. Placing greater emphasis on healing and managing the emotional fatigue associated with being in this work and holding marginalized identities. Understanding ourselves as being part of a much broader social change ecosystem, and how that should influence how we use our power. For example, how we spend our money and with whom we partner in this work. The one thing that I disagree with here is that I'm pretty sure Mary Frances Winters is like a liberal. You know, she just generally believes that this can be incrementally done over time in this capitalistic system. But I would argue, you know, capitalism will ultimately be against any form of total liberation for people, the working class, the ending of white supremacy. Capitalism is sort of built on, predicate on, making sure that there are divisions in the labor force, that there are people that will be pitted against each other because of silly, superficial reasons like race or gender, et cetera, et cetera. I think it's kind of foolish to think that we could reach total liberation through incrementally just having these DEI policies inserted into these Fortune 500 companies, or even lower level, small, medium-sized businesses or smaller institutions like your local public school. We need to have a total revolution in society to be able to really reach these full goals. It seems to me kind of, you know, like putting a Band-Aid over an open wound, like not really stitching up the full cut to try to say that, yeah, centering justice, humanity, and the dismantling of racist systems over the business case. There is no company in a capitalist system that's going to put anything above profits and shareholders, especially in America. There is no company in America that gives a fuck about any of its people, any of its workers, anything that it does to society. If the companies had their way, and America was really ran like a business, which a lot of Americans wish it was, the whole country will be polluted, wasteland, idiocracy. It's got electrolytes. That's what America would be. There's no company that might, and we're seeing how they're rolling that back now with Trump in office. There's a reason a company might promote diversity, might want to have a diverse workforce, because the business case is made. But I find it unfathomable to think that a company would eventually say, yeah, we're advocating for total liberation, we're advocating for decolonization because that's the right thing to do, right? We should have that framework, and people should be thinking of that framework as we take collective action to make a better world. But I find this totally ridiculous that we think, yeah, just centering, these ideas that come from the academy into somehow these businesses is going to bake the change we want to see. It's totally ridiculous. But in summary, there's a lot of work to do to combat sublime ignorance, and it starts with having a deep understanding of racism and its devastating impacts. It requires embracing a new lexicon that puts justice in the DEI equation, DEIJ. To do so, there is a lot to learn, unlearn, and relearn. This book will provide you with the reasons for Black fatigue, how it manifests differently for women, men, those with intersectional identities, and children, and what we can do about it. All right. So, the American Times, the facts speak for themselves. Blacks lag in home ownership, stagnant socioeconomic progress, the top 5%, Black unemployment rates almost 2 times those of whites. The past is all that makes the present coherent, says James Baldwin. Shout out to him. Going to Nelson Moreno, he says, I said not so much. I didn't say that they didn't have a caste system. Their system is generally less rigid and not universally practiced across all Muslim communities in the region. For example, in regions like Kerala, the caste system among Muslims is less pronounced. Listen, Nelson, I don't know if you're Muslim or not, but if you know some Muslims, you'll know very quickly that the times of Jahiliyyah, when the Prophet came, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, when he came and said that tribalism is dead, racism is dead, the last words of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam was that an Arab is no better than a non-Arab, and a non-Arab is no better than an Arab, a black is no better than a white, and a white is no better than a black, other than in piety and oneness with Allah, etc., right? He said all that. And the Muslims the very next year started dividing themselves up on tribes. You can't marry our daughters because you come from another Arab tribe, etc., etc. The divisions, the tribalism, the xenophobia, the discrimination, the nationalism among the Muslims is insane. That's how I started my whole channel talking about. So I don't get what you're trying to get at here, pointing out, it's not so much. The caste system might not be important, but tribalism surely is. Xenophobia surely is. Discrimination based on regionalism surely is amongst the people of Southeast Asia. But I don't get why you would bring that here. What is the point of bringing that here other than you got a big booty Bangladeshi banging in the board head? If you got a big booty Bangladeshi banging her booty on the board head, why are you up in the live stream? You should be taxing that, waxing that, slapping that, clapping that, making that shit pop. I don't get that. Why are we talking about Bangladesh? Why is this text? Why was this live stream about Bangladesh? I have no idea. I have no idea. And Nelson Moreno says, and they have a caste system, doesn't exclude a skin color based system. I'm done. I don't know what's happening here with this. But let's continue here. We will start on chapter 3 tomorrow. We're going to start on chapter 3 tomorrow. Shout out to everybody who tuned in. Shout out to my guy Nelson for the interesting, profound comments. Shout out to Kamal. Shout out to everybody else who's going to watch that on the playback. Y'all be easy out there. Hope you enjoyed this. Pick up this book on Amazon. Support black authors. Support all that good stuff. And support this channel as well. Y'all be easy and peace.